Imagine a world where money is infinite, yet debt still exists. A world where governments can literally create money at will, yet borrow billions, even trillions, as if they didn't have it. Welcome to the debt paradox, the strange, fascinating, and often misunderstood mechanics of modern money. If you love exploring the hidden rules that govern our economy, the story behind money, debt, and global power, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts. By the end of this video, you'll see why $36 trillion in US debt isn't exactly what it seems, and why it matters to every dollar in your pocket. On August 15, 1971, millions of Americans settled in for their favorite TV shows when President Richard Nixon interrupted, announcing, "I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold." It was arguably the biggest peacetime power grab in human history. With this single action, the United States became the banker for the world, a position of almost unimaginable power. From that day forward, the U.S. could create money at will. There would never be a natural limit to how many dollars could exist. Before this moment, every dollar in circulation was theoretically tied to gold reserves. After 1971, the U.S. dollar became fiat money, backed not by a physical commodity, but by trust in the U.S. government and the global economy.
To get my head at least around how big this event was 50 years ago. What caused you to focus on these 3 days in particular?
Well, I think this was the biggest economic event.
Consider a board game of Monopoly. If the banker runs out of money, the rules say they can simply cut more bills and keep the game going. That's essentially what happened. The U.S. became that banker, with the entire world dependent on its currency.
New Hampshire, as of the 1st of July 1944. The U.S., which held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves after the war, was obviously the most influential player and ultimately...
To understand why debt exists in a world where money can be created, we need to go back in time. Long before paper and coins, humans used food as currency. In early agricultural societies, rice wasn't just nourishment, it was a medium of exchange. If it took 8 hours to gather 10 cups of rice, the value of a trade was measured in rice-equivalent labor. This laid the foundation for the labor theory of value. Value corresponds to the labor required to produce it. Those who stored surplus rice held power. They could trade it for time and resources. But rice and other perishable goods have limits. They spoil, they're hard to transport, and scarcity drives inequality. Humans needed something durable, portable, and universally valued. Enter gold. Gold was rare, easy to transport, and desirable across cultures. A handful of gold could represent hundreds of months of labor. The emergence of gold created commodity money and allowed for a standardized system of trade, eventually giving rise to prices.
Small group of people knew this and they profited enormously. The implementation of gold-backed currencies during the colonial period significantly influenced global trade, monetary stability, and economic integration of colonies around the world.
Imagine a market with two tanks, one holding gold coins, the other rice. When buyers spend gold, the market balances supply and demand, establishing prices. If 100 coins chase 1,000 bushels of rice, one coin buys 10 bushels. If a drought reduces rice to 500 bushels, the price rises to 1 coin for 5 bushels. If harvest doubles, the price falls to 1 coin for 20 bushels. Prices fluctuate not just due to goods availability, but also money supply, explaining demand-side inflation and deflation. Inflation and deflation benefit different people differently. Debtors benefit from inflation as they repay loans with less valuable money, while savers benefit from deflation as their money buys more.
The price of gold, which up until that point had been the baseline store of value, more than tripled in price. Thought of another way, by this same standard, the American dollar lost more than 2/3 of its value. This decision preceded 2 decades of record high inflation in the US, where prices are increasing by double-digit percentages year on year.
Gold was eventually replaced by paper receipts and IOUs. Medieval goldsmiths noticed that 90% of deposits were never withdrawn. They began lending out the idle gold, effectively multiplying the money supply. This system evolved into fractional reserve banking, where one coin could support 10 coins in circulation. Eventually, banks realized they didn't need actual gold. They could create money through loans, giving rise to modern debt money, which now constitutes roughly 90% of the world's money supply. Even royal promises were treated as money. In 1672, London goldsmiths lent against King Charles II's IOUs, building credit chains that stretched across the economy. When the king defaulted, the system nearly collapsed, an early warning that trust is the foundation of money.
Enough cash in order to meet those obligations. So let's take a $10 note for example. It costs approximately 3 cents in order to print this note. This means that there's approximately $9.97 of profit for creating a $10 note.
After repeated crises, central banks emerged as a stabilizing force. The Bank of England became the banker to banks, creating base money to prevent systemic collapses. The U.S. Federal Reserve, established in 1913, expanded on this model. During World Wars I and the II, the Fed created massive amounts of money to fund military production. Inflation remained moderate because the money flowed into productive capacity, factories, ships, and planes, rather than speculation. This principle remains today. Money creation works when the economy can absorb it. Otherwise, it triggers inflation.
I just want to offer a few observations about the historical links between money and institutions. Now, one reason I want to do that is because we don't talk about money enough, it seems to me. We definitely don't talk about money enough in the economics profession.
Today, the US dollar is the primary global reserve currency, used in roughly 90% of forex trades and representing about 60% of foreign central bank reserves. This gives the US unique monetary power. It can issue more debt without immediate domestic inflation. Treasury bonds are considered risk-free investments, forming the foundation for global interest rates. When the US spends, the money flows worldwide, creating private sector wealth globally. Yet, even with $36 trillion in national debt, the U.S. private sector holds over $150 trillion in assets. This is why markets remain confident despite large debt numbers.
It was a financial straitjacket, because the money supply was tied to the physical amount of gold in a nation's vaults. Governments had virtually no power to respond to economic crises. If a recession hit, they couldn't stimulate the economy. If banks started failing,
Here's the paradox. Why borrow money if you can create it? The answer lies in market trust and economic capacity. Creating money indiscriminately can cause inflation. Borrowing through debt instruments like treasury bonds signals trustworthiness and distributes risk. Global economies rely on U.S. debt as a safe asset, making borrowing cheaper than printing indiscriminately. Even countries that issue their own currencies face constraints. They can monetize debt, but only up to the productive capacity of their economy. Beyond that, inflation spirals. Countries that don't issue their own currency, like Greece and the Eurozone, must borrow externally, often at high interest rates. Bond yields reflect market confidence. Higher yields indicate greater perceived risk. Historical lessons highlight the delicate balance of debt, money supply, and productivity. Venice in 1171 used forced loans to fund warships, creating early government debt instruments. Wo-Urgel, Austria, in 1932, experimented with expiring stamp money to increase velocity, proving money's function as a medium of exchange matters more than its nominal supply. Hungary in 1946 experienced hyperinflation from printing money to acquire US dollars, showing the consequences of creating money without productive absorption. The debt paradox affects everyone. Household budgets mirror countries that don't create their own currency. Overspending leads to debt crises. Countries issuing their own money can leverage monetary policy, but must balance growth, inflation, and confidence. U.S. debt shapes the global financial system as Treasury yields ripple worldwide, influencing interest rates on everything from mortgages to corporate loans. Economic growth versus Treasury yields is the key metric. If growth exceeds yields, debt is manageable. If yields exceed growth, debt service becomes a burden, threatening stability. As of December 2025, U.S. national debt stands at approximately $36 trillion, while U.S. private sector assets total over $150 trillion. Treasury bonds remain the backbone of global finance, and the dollar remains the world's reserve currency. America can create money, but global absorption and trust are the limits. The paradox isn't theoretical, it's real. Debt exists not because the U.S. can't print money, but because trust, markets, and productive capacity dictate how money circulates. The system is robust, yet fragile. A loss of confidence, mismanaged inflation, or collapse in productive capacity could trigger a crisis. Yet, for now, the paradox persists. We live in a world of debt built on the power to create money. From rice and gold to fiat and debt money, human history shows a constant evolution of currency. Nixon's 1971 decision, fractional reserve banking, and the U.S. dollar's global dominance all created a financial reality where money is both infinite and finite. Debt isn't inherently dangerous, it's a tool shaped by trust, production, and confidence. Understanding this paradox is key to understanding modern economics, global power, and why $36 trillion in debt isn't the disaster it seems. If you want to explore more stories about money, power, and the hidden rules of our economy, subscribe, like, and hit the bell. Let me know in the comments, what would happen if the U.S. suddenly lost the trust of the world?